All right. How are you doing today, sir?
Very well. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I appreciate you joining us for this virtual conference, and definitely highly recommend. Appreciate I always learn a lot from Matt's stuff at Hungry TV, and he was actually someone I've had on the podcast a couple times. So highly recommend. He's really spearheaded a lot of the food side and the restaurateurs and retailer side of the programming that we've done for this conference. So I love that he's bringing together the food and tech, and I think on the tech side, obviously that's your domain and something that I know we first met when you were working on the ride side over at Uber. And I kind of put out there with the title that obviously Uber Eats, I think is a big part of Uber right now these days. And I think I would even argue that they're when you look at, for example, the latest financial numbers they released, a lot higher numbers when it comes to gross bookings there, are gross food there than the bookings. So, we were really excited to have you on, and someone who's worked on both the rides and eat side, and I think you've actually had the exact same title on both sides. Is that right?
Yeah, I was leading the product team for the driver organization on rides. It was a really excellent experience getting closer to the drivers on the platform.
Mhm.
Now, indeed, I lead the product team for Uber Eats.
Yeah, so obviously drivers are still an important part of Uber Eats, but now there's even more people, constituents, and stakeholders to keep happy. So I'm sure your job has gotten a little more challenging, but probably just as fun. So I'd love to dive in because I think you're in such a unique position, having done this job for rides and eats and kind of overseen this huge transition with the pandemic at the company specifically. So I mean, just what's it been like at Uber from an employee or sort of a product lead point of view, with the business swinging so wildly from rides? Obviously most people knew Uber for rides, and now I think most of the business is coming from Eats. So what's that been like at the company?
Well, I mean, I don't think any of us could have really anticipated this. And if anything, I think on Eats, what we're feeling is just a tremendous sense of responsibility to step up and be available at a time when I think the world really needs it. And that's actually true for many of the customers, if you will, that I looked after before, with drivers and delivery people needing a source of earnings. And it was very fortunate for us that we were able to uh, enable drivers to continue earning by delivering. We tried as quickly as possible to reach out to as many drivers as
Yeah.
possible. For many, they were concerned about safety or things that food delivery changed for them, the changed aspects that really enabled us to kind of continue enabling earnings for them along the way. So that was important. But then also, you can't think about COVID without thinking about the impact that it's had on restaurants and on
Yeah.
our communities. I can't walk down the street now in my neighborhood without seeing the challenging times and how they're affecting all merchants, but restaurants in particular. And so it felt like a real sense of responsibility and need to move fast. And so we
Yeah.
moved very, very quickly right away to try to respond, which came in many forms. It came in the form of trying to enable restaurants to find their customers more easily, to onboard onto the platform quickly. The very first days of COVID after the shelter in place, we had thousands of restaurants that were trying to get onto the platform all at once.
Oh, wow.
We found hundreds of people internally to help add menus to the platform. People who had
Mhm.
never added a menu in their lives, but they were doing what they could to get these restaurants onto the platform as quickly as possible. And there's been a lot more since then. So we had, for example, a way for customers to tip restaurants and
Yeah.
essentially contribute to restaurants. Traditionally, you'd contribute to the delivery person. So now you could do both. So a variety of different things like that that were reflective of that. But I think, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, there is now an evolution of thought that's going from, well, how do we respond quickly to the thing that's right in front of us, to what does this mean for the world and the years ahead, not just the months ahead. And so it's fundamentally affected how we're thinking about our next steps.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think I even remember initially placing an Uber Eats order very early on in the pandemic, and seeing that option that you could not only tip the courier, but you could leave a little extra for the restaurants. And that was something that I thought was pretty cool. And, I think it seems simple in the future, but I'm sure quite a bit of effort and work goes into developing these product features and changes and really adapting quickly. So I'm curious, in that initial sort of onset of the pandemic, you mentioned that you're onboarding, the restaurants and drivers and customers. What group of the three, I would say was most challenging? Was it most challenging to sign up a bunch of drivers quickly for Eats, or was it most challenging to get the restaurants and food menus? What was your experience?
Well, for sure, we were fortunate that if you're a driver on Uber, it's actually a tap of a button in order to be
Right.
able to deliver on Eats. So we were very fortunate that that was kind of always there.
Yeah.
Not in anticipation of a pandemic so much as an anticipation of wanting people to earn as flexibly as possible on the platform. And so that was always an option. Now, way more drivers were choosing it than ever before, which is great. So that I actually, in a strange way, that part went fairly smoothly. Enabling restaurants to orient their work and their businesses around delivery was definitely more of a challenge, because there's the logistics element of actually adding yourself to the platform, getting your menu digitized, et cetera. But there's also quite a bit more operational work they think about in terms of how to retool their restaurant for delivery, which I think took a moment. And it's been amazing actually to see the resilience and fortitude of restaurants doing that and adapting, and I think that was very, very encouraging. And it's worth pointing out also that it isn't just about restaurants doing delivery. In many cases, this is restaurants that wanted to do pickup instead. Not every restaurant wants to orient around delivery, so pickup became a very important part of Uber Eats. And then another element that started showing up for restaurants is that many small and medium-sized businesses don't have the technology teams or the tooling to go and build up a big web presence. And so for customers that are saying, well, the restaurant's closed, how do I get to them? They might be Googling for them, they might be going directly to their website. And so we recently launched a capability that we call online ordering, which enabled restaurants to embed Uber Eats onto their website very, very simply. And when they do that, it's just their restaurant. They get to control the branding. It's not Uber Eats branded. But we try to do all the hard bits around actually making sure the delivery works, actually enabling the payment method for the customer, actually doing all those things that are otherwise quite complex to do. So I'd say the restaurants had the biggest transformations to do, and it's still an evolving process for them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't seen actually that functionality, or I guess I haven't been on any restaurants' websites that have that, but I'm sure we'll start to see a lot more of those, or I guess that Uber Eats integration directly. But I do think that's interesting and kind of makes a lot of sense there. I mean, what are your thoughts on the pickup versus delivery? You mentioned that. I mean, I think I got a notification from my Uber Eats app the other day about pickup. I see a big, I wouldn't say shift, but it seems like a lot of the app delivery companies are pushing forward and, presenting pickup as an option. I'm curious kind of what the benefits are there for Uber Eats, for example. I mean, I think the benefits on the restaurant side are a lot clearer. I'm assuming it's cheaper for them, right? Because there's no driver involved.
Yeah, for the restaurant, pickup just means that there's no delivery fee, and because there's no delivery. So it simplifies things for that. I think in order to really understand our thinking around pickup and delivery, you actually have to zoom out and think, what is it that we're trying to accomplish in general here? And really what we see as our value proposition is that we want to provide instant access to local commerce. And every word in that sentence matters a lot, because I think local commerce has been so heavily impacted by a transition to e-commerce over the span of years, long before COVID. COVID has just amplified the challenge and the impact. But local commerce has been pretty fundamentally impacted. And what we started asking ourselves is there actually a way to turn local into an advantage, into a differentiator? And we think there is. And we think that instant access is one of the biggest value props that local merchants have. Now, beyond that, by the way, one should definitely not overlook the fact that restaurants and all local merchants play a role in your community, play a role in the fabric of what it means to walk down the street, to drive down. So that's incredibly important. That now coupled with the fact that the proximity to customers means that local merchants actually can get you goods much faster than anyone else actually should be an advantage. And that's what we see as the future of Uber Eats. And so then whether that is achieved through pickup, which means we make it frictionless for the customer to choose what they want and the order is ready as soon as they are ready to pick it up. And maybe for them, that's more convenient. For some cases, you pick up the kids and you go on the way home, you pick up what it is you wanted to purchase. Or whether it's done through delivery, meaning you don't even have to leave the house and it comes to you, that's actually just two different sides of the same coin, which is all in service of providing instant access to local commerce.
Got it. So I guess it's sort of the idea that, when I open the Uber Eats app, whether I want to pick up or whether I want delivery, it's all instant and kind of that instant gratification. I mean, that's pretty typical with, I guess food in general, right? When you when you're ordering food, it's often on demand nature. And I mean, I guess that, as far as the restaurants, obviously, I think we've seen a lot of talk about the fees that the app delivery companies are charging. I'd be curious to get your perspective, because I think that, obviously these things have costs, right? It costs money to deliver food, and it costs money, for Uber to operate the Uber Eats app. So I'm curious, how do you think about the fees that restaurants are being charged, and what's fair versus not fair? And I mean, even pushing, I mean, maybe restaurants into delivery versus pickup. I think the pickup option is interesting because the fees are less there, for example, right?
Well, I think the thing to keep in mind is, and pickup is a notable exception, where, by the way, there are fewer fees as a result. We don't charge some of the fees when there's no delivery required. But essentially, the difference between the rides business and the delivery and eats business for Uber is that there's actually three parties, and there's a consumer, but there's two earners on the platform: the person doing the delivery person, and then the restaurant. And so we need to design an ecosystem that actually makes both the delivery people and the restaurants successful. And so the fees are all in service of making that whole ecosystem work. Now, the reality is it only works if this is helping restaurants be successful, if this is helping the delivery people be successful. So ultimately, the North Star is pretty clear, and you can tell it when I say things like our goal is to provide instant access to local commerce. The focus is on actually making local commerce quite successful. So I think we're all kind of adapting to the situation right now, because the way that people are using Uber Eats is now pretty different from the way it was even just 7 or 8 months ago.
How so? Is that more orders or different types of orders?
Way more orders, way more frequent. And indeed, the orders are changing in shape as well. So the baskets have gotten bigger, and I think that's not surprising. People tend to now order for all the people in their home. And then we see more lunchtime ordering than we had seen before. Previously, it was more skewed toward dinner time, but now if you're working from home or otherwise, then that plays a bigger role. And then I see, the big transformation that you probably saw right at the beginning of the pandemic. We were sending messaging out to customers saying $0 delivery if you order from local restaurants. And so that actually created way more demand from the local restaurants, the small and medium-sized businesses, which was really exciting to see. And so.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think obviously, from talking to restaurants, obviously one of the main benefit to being on an app like Uber Eats, if you're a smaller restaurant, is basically the free marketing, the free lead gen, whatever you might want to call it. I think one of the complaints that they've had is obviously the fees, but I guess also, sort of as someone who owns a media business, I understand, right? The key to owning, a successful media business is you have to own your own customers, right? And so if you don't ever actually own the customers and they're always coming to you through an Uber Eats app, for example, or any app for that matter, right? If they were to change, the fees that they charge or the way that they highlight you in the app, that can be very painful. I have seen, that the big brands like Starbucks and Chipotle, it looks like they're able to negotiate deals where, you can now opt in. When I place a Starbucks order on Uber Eats, it says that, do you want to share your contact information with Starbucks? I'm curious how you think about that. I assume the big brands have a lot of leverage, but how do you think about kind of helping the smaller brands or, the restaurants kind of when it comes to having that connection to their consumers?
It's an excellent question, an incredibly important part of what we're doing. So I'll give you a number of examples. They're all in service of creating a stronger connection between the customer and the merchant and the restaurant. So I mentioned already online ordering. That now makes it possible for a customer who wants delivery or pickup to actually do that directly on the property from that restaurant.
Got it.
And it's not branded Uber Eats. It's branded the restaurant. We're not trying to.
Are they paying the same commission or fees as if if the order were to come through Uber Eats?
No, because we didn't generate that customer for them. Our role is to drive demand to those restaurants. So if we didn't do that, then we don't charge them as if they did that.
Got it.
So they get access to customers and to all of these expectations that customers now have around delivery and pickup directly on their website, but we try to do what we can to add value there in a way that might otherwise be difficult. So for example, most customers are Uber users or Uber Eats users already. So when you get to that restaurant's website, you don't have to log in again. You don't have to
Mm,
create an account. You don't have to enter your address. Each of those are moments of friction in the
yeah,
funnel that would
that's a
hurt
good point.
for a restaurant. We're able to make that seamless. You also don't need to enter your credit card or payment information if you are already an Uber user. So these are ways that we can reduce friction.
Yeah.
Another example is in the interaction during an order, which is actually quite complex. But when a customer is placing an order, or when a customer has rated an order afterwards, or rated a particular item, or even if they were contacting support because they had an issue with an order, we're actually opening up a channel where that customer can communicate directly with the restaurant.
Hmm.
Customer service is a big part of why restaurants exist in the first place.
Yeah.
That most of them are very customer obsessed and want to deliver good customer service. So that's something that we've enabled as well. And then the last example that I think is really fun is when you place an order, what you may not realize is that behind the scenes, what we're actually sending to the restaurant is not only the order, but a little indication of whether you're one of their regulars.
Hmm.
So they will see, and there's a burger place down the street for me that I think is a pretty embarrassing number for me at this point. It's got to be over 100 orders that I've placed from them over the years. And
Well,
they
you
now
probably have a lot of free credits, right?
I think I've exceeded my free credits thanks to the restaurant at this point. But they see when I place an order from them,
Mm-hmm.
the number of orders that I've placed.
Hmm.
They also, by the way, if you order from them and you've never ordered before, it will say that you're a new customer.
Hmm.
And so this enables a restaurant to do some of the things you would do in the normal world, if you will, of recognizing your regulars, but also welcoming newcomers.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's not a perfect analogy yet. We're early in that journey, but it reflects a little of how we're thinking.
Yeah. Well, that I actually like all of those examples, but I mean, just specifically to piggyback on, I mean, I think it kind of highlights the advantages of technology. Of course, with any technologies, there's positives and negatives, but I think a lot of times people don't necessarily understand what the positives are of, kind of how they can take it, kind of merge the best of the old worlds and the best of the new worlds, right? Like you said, that customer experience, that hands-on nature that restaurants love. I mean, I kind of imagine, for any new customer, just dropping in a little cookie, for example, and just with a little thank you note, your return customers, when there's someone when you're really busy, prioritizing them over someone who's just, maybe orders once every year or once every 3 months, right? I mean, those are kind of the tough business choices that business owners have to make, and often they're going in without any data. And it sounds like now you guys are at least trying to enable some of that.
That's right.
Very cool. And I mean, I think too on the second example that you mentioned, which remind me, what was the second example?
So the ability for the restaurant to actually connect with a customer when there's an issue in an order.
Yeah. The customer service area, I guess, is one thing that, I guess from my experience from working with many rideshare drivers, as you know, is that drivers have a lot of issues. And so customer service is frankly, I think one of the areas that, Uber and other TNC struggled with over the years, because there's a lot of unique situations and a lot of help that drivers need on the product side for Uber. And this is kind of where I want to get your take. I think it's a great product. It's very flawless. You almost never have to reach out to customer support as a customer, so you don't have those issues. But now in this three-sided marketplace, customers are probably reaching out. I imagine a lot of people are reaching out. All three sides of the marketplace are reaching out a lot more, because, if I order my burger and fries from your favorite burger place and they forget ketchup, I'm pissed at the restaurant, I'm pissed at the courier, I'm pissed at Uber, I'm pissed at kind of everyone. So how are you, thinking about like these customer service channels, and like, how do you plan on handling, right? Like I know Uber drivers love the ability to be able to call Uber when they launch that. And that's sort of where they would get better support than email. And then when they launched in person, that was kind of like the gold standard. So how are you thinking about the different constituents and kind of how you can support them when issues, kind of undoubtedly arise?
Absolutely. And it's actually a very real problem. The number of things that can go wrong when you have three parties in the mix, we have food preferences, dietary restrictions, other things like that in the mix, it is much longer. And it makes for definitely a much more challenging customer service environment. And to the point earlier, sometimes you want that customer service to come from Uber. Sometimes you want it to come from the restaurant. Managing that in an effective way that is seamless for customers is also a challenge. We have a long way to go here. There is definitely more, I think, that we need to do to make customer service delightful with Uber Eats. Some of that is getting better at managing that complexity. Some of that is also being more intuitive. And I'll tell you what I mean by being more intuitive. This is going to potentially sound like we're trying to dodge customer service, but trust me, we're actually trying to do quite the opposite here. The more that we can automatically detect that an issue is happening and take action on it before you've even flagged it, or do it automatically when you flag it, the easier it is for you as a customer, the less cumbersome it is for you to engage with a customer service department. Remember, you're trying to eat. So a specific example of that is a good customer that tells us in the app that there was an issue with an order where there was a missing item can get reimbursed instantly for that item. And they get asked immediately, do you want to order it again? Should we try again? Or do you want to just get your money back? That means there's no need for a customer service interaction. So the more that we can build that kind of technology, the more enjoyable the product becomes to use. But in addition to that, I also think that when customers reach out to us, be it by phone, by email, through the app, whatever it is, we need to make that experience better and better. And the complexities, they're why we exist. So we need to work through those complexities.
Yeah. And I think it sort of brings up one of the larger, I guess you would say issues that I've had with food delivery at large is I sort of think of it as a game of telephone, right? Normally when you have yourself just ordering food, it's pretty straightforward. But then when you have a courier involved and when you have Uber Eats involved, it sometimes places the orders, right? It's just going through more people and there's more room for issues. And, sort of unlike a ride where, if a driver takes a wrong turn, you might arrive at your destination 1 or 2 minutes later, but you still arrive at your destination, right? If there's an error on your food, it may be unedible, right? And so I think it sounds like, because some of these issues are so complex, just kind of removing them from the equation completely is, sort of more of the path that you want to take. And it kind of gets me into more the larger, sort of, I guess, holistic space of delivery. Like I've been a bit bearish on the space just because of some of those instances, in my experience as a courier and ordering it. Like, how do you look at the economics of food delivery with basically, 4 people involved in every single transaction? Is there enough money to go around? And, kind of what is that path to profitability? Because obviously the gross, bookings for Eats is quite high right now, but the profitability is a different story.
Well, the focus for us right now is to build a use case that is more frequent. I think the more successful we are at increasing the frequency with which people engage, and also the more successful we are at delivering value to customers through the membership program, Eats Pass and Uber Pass, the more successful that all sides of that ecosystem will be. And indeed, we've seen that happen now. So the goal of instant access to local commerce is actually a broadening out from restaurant and food delivery. By the way, without losing focus on it, this is our bread and butter, but recognizing that grocery is an increasingly important use case. Pharmacy, flowers, toys, all manner of merchants have a role on the platform. And if we can get that right, what happens is the frequency of ordering goes up. And what the membership program does is it eliminates the delivery fee out of that. So as a result of increasing frequency, we can then afford to lower some of the costs associated with the overall product. That produces a really successful ecosystem for everyone. So that's kind of the North Star that we have.
So it sounds like these other products that you'd be adding, do they need to be higher margin? Because I guess if you're adding more of the same that's not profitable and the frequency is increasing there, it doesn't necessarily get you to profitable. But I guess I'm curious, like you mentioned, I guess I'm thinking like groceries, alcohol, flowers. I don't know exactly what the margins are on all these products, but I assume some of these things that are pre-made or pre-cooked or pre-bottled have higher margins.
I'm looking at it more as an ecosystem right now, and I guess with my kind of head of product hat on. The goal is to increase that frequency because as a result of that, it becomes kind of a daily use case. Some orders are obviously naturally going to be more valuable than others. Sometimes it'll be because of the nature of the goods. Sometimes it'll be because of the size of the basket. By the way, one of the other things that will start to happen is that your delivery person might be bringing you things from more than one merchant at a time. In fact, we actually just announced this last week. So you can now order from more than one restaurant at a time. So it might be that someone else in the household wants one thing and you want another, and you can do that. That delivery person is going to be bringing both orders, which is way more efficient, both for them and for the household. Imagine the next step as we broaden out beyond pure restaurants and food delivery. Now that delivery person might be bringing in some groceries, some prepared food, and maybe something from the toy store or whatnot. Not the best scenario, but you get my point.
Got it.
And so there's an efficiency that comes from all of that. And so in aggregate, the goal is to create that daily use case.
Got it. Do you see that there's more opportunity to increase the frequency kind of directly in, the food delivery and kind of those items that you're being delivered, or versus, kind of these ancillary grocery delivery, toys, whatever else might be? Because obviously Uber did, or I guess is looking at, corner shop and, kind of getting into grocery delivery. And it sounds like trying to merge some of the efficiencies across, different sectors, but, really they're kind of all, maybe not all food delivery, but they're sort of all some sort of last mile delivery that doesn't involve yourself, right? Which I think of as rides.
Well, the first thing that we saw with COVID is that I think pre-COVID, food delivery was fairly niche.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's incredibly mainstream. That's a start. Now, the question is, does that all go back post-COVID or not? And I actually think there'll be some kind of correction, but I think the reality is we've now exposed the value of food delivery to way more people. And so I don't think that's going to go away. I think that value is now seen. In addition to that, we see that grocery tends to be a weekly use case for people. So it's actually quite frequent. In fact, for many people, that's more frequent than food delivery.
Yeah.
And when you actually then zoom out to include more forms of merchants and retail, then the frequency becomes quite a bit bigger. So for sure, I see growth in the food delivery space, but I think adding these other types of verticals and these other merchants is going to just deliver that much more habitual value to users, which I think will help quite a lot.
Yeah. And I mean, I think obviously you guys aren't the only ones to identify the opportunity in some of these other spaces. There's obviously a lot of competition in the big fields like grocery delivery, but I mean, even others, like the sort of like more niche items, I guess you would say. But I mean, there's, a company that some people have heard of called GoPuff. I think they're valued at a few $billions. And, I would kind of consider them as like niche delivery product, I mean, the sort of non-perishable items and not a lot of people think about. So how do you look at the competition and, sort of obviously, Uber is in the middle of acquiring Postmates, but I'm curious to know how you think about kind of the competition, but also the consolidation.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to see what we're doing. That is how we see the value of our services when you connect them with each other. Mm-hmm. And so we talked in the context of Uber Eats, we talked about food delivery and Eats Pass membership. Now, when we added grocery to Uber Eats, we also then made it so you would get free delivery on your groceries. So as part of Eats Pass, now Eats Pass became stronger and more valuable as a result because it spanned more than one. The thing to keep in mind is that we also have Uber Pass, which is growing very quickly in the US.
Right.
And in several other countries. And so that's actually the first membership program where you now have rides, so transportation, food delivery, grocery. And so you can start seeing the connection across these services. And it just becomes more valuable, delivers more value to customers as a result of doing more things. And so that's the North Star that we have. So I think you're right that we're always going to see more players doing individual verticals. And that may serve some customers really well. The focus we have is on looking much more broadly at convenience in your life, be it transportation, mobility, or be it delivery, which started out with food delivery, but will expand quickly beyond that.
Got it. Makes sense. And obviously food delivery is sort of the biggest category right now. So do you have thoughts on sort of, I mean, obviously, like, I guess I am curious, maybe to sort of wrap things up here as far as like, what do you see as sort of the benefits of like wrapping up Postmates, for example, into the Uber Eats platform? If you guys are already, right, you said you're differentiating yourselves from other companies in these other verticals by offering everything in one. Obviously Postmates and DoorDash and these competitors can't do that in the food delivery space because they're not doing groceries, they're not doing rides. So what's the strategy kind of behind, like picking up a smaller competitor in the food delivery space?
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't really speak to the Postmates component.
It's worth a shot.
Yeah, it's totally worth a shot. I appreciate it. But I think the thing to just, almost everything we do can be explained by going back to the overall strategy. Instant access to local commerce. And our aim is to do that in as many places as possible. By the way, recognizing that rides are available pretty much everywhere. And so we want as much as possible to be able to deliver that portfolio of value across the piece.
Yeah.
And you can see it coming to life, starting with food delivery, turning into grocery, turning into more verticals. In fact, there are places where we're now piloting 5 or 6 different verticals at the same time in order to see what customers value most. You also will start seeing this manifesting through the product. So a couple weeks ago, we announced quite a few product changes that essentially represent the new Uber Eats. Everything from totally revamped discovery that now spans multiple types of verticals, but also elevates the presence of small and medium-sized businesses, makes pickup a truly delightful experience, enables you to order from multiple restaurants. So you're going to see all of those things start manifesting in the product, and it's really exciting to see come together. All of that is now in service of enabling all manner of local commerce, and I think that's the bit that we're most focused on.
Very cool. Well, I really appreciate you coming to Curbivore and for our first annual virtual conference. And I'm excited to see what Uber Eats is in store for the future. I usually ask my guests, sort of where they can find your work. But I think if we want to follow your work, it's really just follow the Uber Eats app, right?
Yeah, open the app.
That'll be what you're up to. And I do appreciate you for coming on. We've got we've got a full afternoon of programming for everyone. So I want everyone to stay tuned. We're going to break into workshops now. So if you go, as soon as this main stage is over, you can head over to the sessions tab, and we've got a bunch of workshops, a lot of restaurateurs, retailers, focused stuff, profits and platforms in the world of pickup and delivery from Get Swift. So we've got a lot of cool workshops coming up in the afternoon. I really appreciate you coming on, Daniel. Take care, everyone, and see you in the afternoon sessions.
Thank you.